Ever feel like the resources and advice out there for women are missing something essential? I thought so too, which is why more than 6 years ago, I created She Said, She Said. I'm Laura Cox Kaplan, and after 3 decades in communications and then advocacy and now juggling motherhood and entrepreneurship, trust me, friend, I get it. Making a real impact takes more than just passion. It takes the right mindset, the right skills, the right investments, and the right community. On this show, we dive deep with incredible women from all walks of life who have been there. We uncover the secrets to building influence, navigating tricky relationships, and staying true to ourselves even when it's tough. And let's face it, it often is. I also throw in my own favorite productivity and life hacks, things that have shifted my perspective and might help you too. Wherever you are in your journey, my goal here is to leave you inspired to define success your way and to help you build the confidence you need to tackle your biggest goals. Subscribe today and let's unlock your full potential, your confidence, and your greatest influence. Hey friend, welcome to the podcast. You know, the pressure to do it all and to do it all well can be really overwhelming. And when you add in a healthy heaping of perfectionism, as many of us have a tendency to do, it can result in a recipe for accomplishing less of those things that matter the most to us. Now, friend, I get it. You have a lot on your plate, and you have a lot of people who depend on you. And you're also committed to doing your absolute best in every aspect of your life. But this week's guest shares some advice that is counterintuitive for how to plow through those projects and goals on your list. Emmy award-winning journalist Elisabeth Leamy, who joins me for this episode, knows a thing or two about achieving big goals. From her incredibly impressive career as a consumer and investigative reporter at ABC News for many years, as a winner of 13 Emmys and the author of 2 books, she is absolutely incredible. But the topic that I think you'll especially appreciate today is how Elisabeth mastered the art of prioritization. And she did so by doubling down on an approach that is counterintuitive that she developed called the TRIfecta Technique. Now, TRIfecta helps folks categorize and prioritize tasks in a way that's both simple and innovative, but that also relies on a healthy dose of brain science. But there's another important dimension to this conversation that I think will really resonate with you. It's the part of the conversation where Elisabeth and I talk about both her career reinvention as well as her professional through line. And there are some amazing ahas in this part of the conversation that I think you'll really appreciate. Friend, here is episode 308, my conversation with the fabulous Elisabeth Leamy. Enjoy. Elisabeth, welcome to She Said, She Said.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your podcast and the whole concept, and it's a treat to be a part of it.
Well, you are very kind, and I'm really excited to have you. And most of all, I'm excited to talk about your story. And specifically, to sort of start us off, I want you to tell listeners about this amazing technique called the TRIfecta Technique, which has helped you create more balance, a better ability to prioritize lots of incredible things. You have had this amazing career, and this became a tool that you use. So talk to us about, first of all, what that is. What is the TRIfecta Technique?
Well, I have news for you. Mom was wrong. How's that for a teaser? I love my mom. We all love our moms, but mom was wrong on this one. I believe you should not always try to do your best. And in fact, my thesis is that by not always doing your best, you can do the best work of your life.
Interesting.
Whether that is in your personal affairs or in your career. And so that's the teaser. That's the high level view. I'm sure you want me to go into a bit more.
Please do.
Yes. So the problem as I see it is that people and organizations are sort of staggering under the weight of too many competing priorities and then running on this endless treadmill trying to perfect
Right.
everything and consequently perfecting oftentimes nothing. That was certainly the case with me in my work at ABC News and Good Morning America. When I tried to make everything my best, often nothing was. So, as a network news correspondent, I received a new set of competing priorities every day, sometimes every hour. And I was forced, in order to survive, to come up with something that would help me sift through all of this and do great work amid the chaos. And so, yes, I have said the shocking thing, you should not always do your best, but here's what you should do. I believe I basically dare people to divide their work into good, better, and best. All of our work must meet this baseline of good, good enough. Much of our work will be better. And then we sort of conserve and steal time and resources and energy from those two lower levels to make a few projects or priorities per year our very best. And to me, that is the way to do incredible things in the world.
I love what you just said, but I have so many questions, and the
Please.
the closet or less closeted perfectionist in me, and I suspect I have many listeners who are hearing this saying, "Okay, Elisabeth, great, that sounds great, but how do we know the difference between good, better, and best?" Because some of us, no names, but some of us have trouble finding the off button. How do we know when it's good enough?
Yes, even though I have this technique and I speak about it to audiences all over the place, I struggle with this myself still. It is an incredible human urge to want to do everything our best. In fact, there's neuroscience around this. Researchers did this study where they offered college students $20 to achieve one of two tasks to perfection. And they didn't give them enough time to do both. And yet, the vast majority of these college students who could probably really use the $20 for beer money or whatever tried to do both tasks instead of against their own self-interest, instead of trying to do one and nailing it. So that's what we're up against. But I developed a way, sometimes it's obvious when something should just be good enough. An email to somebody at your same level in the company. You don't need to ace that, right? Let's just get it out and keep moving. But I know that people struggle with this. So I developed the TRI in TRIfecta stands for talent, reward, impact. And this is 3 questions you ask yourself. Does the given opportunity align with my or my organization's true talents? Does it have the potential to reap rich rewards? And of course, in business, revenue, another R word, is the most obvious reward, but there are many others that are worthwhile. Great publicity, a great new relationship, etc. Whatever you consider internally to you and your organization to be reward. And then finally, does this opportunity have the merit to make a positive impact in the outside world? If any one of these is true, talent, reward, or impact, do a good job. If 2 of the 3 are true, any 2, do a better job. And if all 3 are true, that is when you have hit the trifecta and you should do your very best.
I love that construct. That is such a beautiful way to think about intention and prioritization and just how to know the difference between which things you should and can spend more time on. I love that. I'd love, Elisabeth, to go back in your story a bit and have you talk to us about you won 13 Emmys while you were working as a broadcast journalist. You were a nationally known consumer affairs and investigative journalist during that time. How did you, or was there a moment in your life when you sort of discovered how this process could work for you? Maybe talk a little bit about how you came to this aha moment, or was it just something that was so gradual that you had always been doing it and didn't realize it maybe?
It is something that evolved, and I had been sort of, reaching for it when I worked in local news. And then when I got to the network level, oof, what a scene. I mean, at ABC News, it was designed that we competed not only with CNN, NBC, CBS, etc. We competed with our fellow correspondents for airtime.
That's so tough.
It was tough. Mentally, physically, stamina wise, all of it. And so I reached this breaking point. I alluded earlier to always trying to do my best and consequently never doing my best. And it was really desperation that made me start stepping back and consciously, this is the thing about what I now call the trifecta technique. Trust me, it didn't have a name at the time. But I gave myself permission to, on purpose, in advance, look at the tasks before me, projects in my case, and decide, okay, this one is just a little informational consumer story. Sometimes they had me do goofy stories, how to load the dishwasher to get your dishes the most clean. That is not going to make or break anybody's life. Maybe their marriage, but not their life. So that was just a good. But if something could save lives or get laws changed for the better or make a difference in the world and maybe win me an Emmy and get the boss off my back too, that deserved my very best. And then frankly, the betters in the middle often were goods where I got lucky and it just was better because of circumstances or things that fed right into my sweet spot. Or sometimes they were best that fell short. And you know what? That's okay.
Elisabeth, I'm curious, because my audience is primarily women, what did you find in the research about good, better, best, and how it resonates maybe differently for women?
This whole concept of not always doing your best and ditching the pointless perfectionism is frankly more relevant and more important for women than for men. For whatever reason, starting as young girls, we internalize this perfectionistic technique or tendency rather. And there's a lot of science about it actually. So for example, there's one study that shows that girls will go crazy at a young age getting A pluses, which as you well know, don't get you anything extra in your grade point average. I mean, my own daughter would nail her math homework and then go back and recopy the entire thing in incredible calligraphy and with colors and swirls and hearts and ridiculous, And by contrast, boys, on the whole, will do just enough to get a 93% or whatever it is that counts as an A. And then they'll go off and do some extracurricular activities or, sports or something else that gives them joy and balance. And in fact, there is one story told to me by a psychologist of twin boy and girl. And the girl tortured herself, staying in, getting the perfect A+ grades, and her twin brother got A's, some A minuses, but, did sports, was on the school paper, drama, everything. And guess who got into the better colleges?
Interesting.
So, yeah, women, we just need a little reminder that not everything needs to be our best. And frankly, sometimes we do this better in our personal lives than our professional lives. I mean, I bet you don't cook a gourmet meal every Tuesday. Right?
No, I don't.
I mean, Trader Joe's stir fry in a sack will do just fine. It's good enough, nutritious and easy, right? But maybe we, go all out for a fancier meal when the mother-in-law is in town or whatever your version of, needing to make it better. So yes, I think women need to remember that you don't always have to be perfect. And here's something that was a real revelation for me. Like it or not, none of us always do everything perfectly. But when you use this trifecta technique and decide in advance which things just have to be good enough, the same output that's just good enough, not perfect, is a success. Whereas if you were trying to make it your best and it isn't, that same output was a failure. Bummer. So that is the power of deciding in advance and giving yourself permission to not always do your best and to save your best, that precious best effort for when it really matters.
Oh, I could not love that more. That's fantastic. I'm curious about your pivot from broadcast news into the work that you're doing now. You are a public speaker. You're a consultant. You write a regular column that is focused on consumer finance and consumer affairs. Did you find that the TRIfecta technique helped you make the decision to pivot, or sort of what was that moment when you realized it was time? And maybe talk us through that career pivot decision.
This is such a great question because you actually made me just realize something about myself that I hadn't ever thought through so concretely. I quit my 21-year-old self's dream job as consumer correspondent for Good Morning America because the show, in a quest for ratings, was going shallow. My slot where I used to do what I thought was really useful work that helped viewers was getting taken over by a bunch more celebrity interviews and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, and this is the part I hadn't thought of until you asked me that wonderful question, I couldn't do my best there anymore. And so I quit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I still had that urge, as a consumer reporter, you feel very good about the fact that your work is contributing something and doing good in the world and helping people. And I know so many of us have that desire. And so I was in a funk for a while. But then when I realized that I had developed this technique that could help other people again in a whole new way, that's when I got fired up again and started honing the TRIfecta technique, spent several years researching the neuroscience, the business case studies, and so forth that explain why it makes sense and why it works so beautifully. And so here I am now, just on the cusp of a full launch of speaking on this topic. I actually spoke previously about media relations issues and how to get media attention and such, but I crave a bigger stage and a bigger impact. So I've realized this is what I need to share.
Yeah. Oh, that's so exciting. I mean, it's really incredible. And you kind of alluded to this when you answered my question about, your work as a broadcast news journalist. Highly, highly competitive field, hard to break into, hard to compete on a daily basis. That was your dream job from the time that you were young, you just said. How hard was it for you to make the decision to pivot into something else?
There was some therapy involved.
Yeah, I would think. Yeah.
Yes. So my identity was very much wrapped up in being this crusading journalist. The part about people recognizing me on the street or that kind of thing, I never cared about. And frankly, when I'm out and about, I don't look much like my heavily made up self on TV anyway. But at a cocktail party, when somebody asked, very Washington, D.C., where I live, what do you do? I had a pretty cool answer.
Right.
And when I stopped that, my answer became more of a, well, this plus that, plus, it's sort of I joked that I had was a slasher career, now I'm a
Yes.
speaker slash author slash podcaster for a while slash this, that, and the other. And so it has taken some time. And I was raised very much to be a career woman by two architects who loved what they did and taught me to find something I would love to do. And so it was hard.
It's what you said is so interesting, and this is a topic that I talked about with Fran Hauser. I don't know if you know Fran, but she is amazing. Had this incredible career at Time Inc. Wrote the book Myth of the Nice Girl. She has now pivoted into coaching women to write nonfiction books and kind of bring their ideas to life. And she is fabulous. But like you, she had a career, and like me too, actually, a career that was easily defined at a cocktail party. It didn't require a 90-second or 2-minute explanation of where you spend your time. You could say, I am a broadcast journalist. And to pivot into something that, for many of us who pivot from a corporate career, something that's clearly defined, into something that is you're less able to define it cleanly, let's say, can in and of itself create, I think, a lot of self-doubt in thinking, okay, worrying too much maybe about what the person that you're talking to thinks about your answer. And maybe that's just me, but it took me a long time to get past the fact that it was sort of hard for me to explain where I was spending my time and why I made this big pivot. So I'm curious if you kind of feel that same sort of, I don't know if it really is self-doubt or just kind of insecurity maybe about what someone's going to think. And, obviously that doesn't really matter, but it can be, I think, maybe hard to kind of lasso that.
Yes. Well, yes, yes, and yes. It is tough. And you kind of wonder, if I can't explain it well, does that mean it's not worthy?
Exactly. Oh, beautifully said.
Yes. And in fact, it's funny, here I am fully launching as what I refer to as a professional speaker or keynote speaker. And people often ask me, well, what is that? And I said, well, those people when you go to a big conference who are up there and they do get it if I say motivational speaker or inspirational speaker, but the marketplace has
Right.
changed and those just sort of rah, let's go troops speeches aren't what business wants anymore. People want meaty content that their audience can take away and learn something and implement. Hopefully, if I do it right, it is still motivational or inspirational. But so sometimes I
Right.
just say motivational speaker because it's something people understand, but it's not quite right. So yes,
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
am putting myself out there as I guess what we'll
Yeah.
say a motivational and or informational speaker, maybe. I'm still working on it.
Love that.
I tend to define it instead of what I am. I try to define it as the problem that I solve for people. But there still comes a time where I have to explain what I do to solve that, or how do I communicate that information to them. And so, yes, so for the record, for anyone listening who might need what are we calling it now? Motivational and informational speaker, I'm available. And I'm sharing this technique, which I believe the TRIfecta Technique can help frontline employees, people in leadership, the organization as a whole. At every level, people are struggling, people and organizations are struggling with having too many priorities. In the case of businesses, there's an incredible study showing that the more strategic priorities a business has, the slower and lower its revenue growth. I mean, bam, what could be more persuasive than that? Yes, so I'm really excited about it, but you're right, it's not as easy to explain. And boy, have I spent a lot of time trying to come up with an elevator pitch and all that stuff that people tell you to do. And I'm not sure that's the right path. But it's a treat to be able to speak with you about it because you understand, and hopefully your listeners can relate too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love what you just said, and I think what you said is so incredibly relatable that, sometimes when we pivot into these, you called it a slasher career, portfolio career, a multi-hyphenate, a multi-potential. I mean, all these terms that are horrible terms, by the way. You being a journalist and me being a communications person, we should be able to come up with better terminology for this, but maybe not today on this podcast. Nevertheless, I think what you said will really resonate with folks. There's another dimension that I want you to talk for a second about, because as I was doing my research on the incredible work that you've done, including the two books that you wrote on consumer finance, and one is focused specifically on, and I'll give folks the punchline, the fact that focusing on big savings versus small savings is a better way to go, which is also a kind of a counterintuitive way to think about savings. It's less about your Starbucks and more about the big things in your life. So I'm curious, Elisabeth, whether you, excuse me, whether you thought about and applied this TRIfecta technique approach as you were writing this book and coming up with that concept.
Yes and no. I didn't recognize it as such at the time, but I think the through line is that I am a contrarian thinker and I like to challenge the status quo. So my book, Save Big, was full of saving strategies, every single one of which could save you at least $1,000. And it was absolutely on purpose my answer to that much more famous book, The Latte Factor, which claims, you'll be a millionaire if you skip your daily latte, you know. And I reject that logic. I mean, yes, it will work. And if you are really in strapped circumstances, absolutely. But I think that latte, especially with a friend, has meaning. And there are way more boring things that you can save a lot more money on. I mean, shopping around for car insurance. Every time I tell a friend to do this, they save at least $1,000 per year.
Wow.
And other things that are just boring to spend money on. You can, within, a few hours of work, you can contest your property tax assessment and get that lowered by often tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, I would just way rather every now and then work really hard to save some money rather than scrimping and struggling every single day. So yes, there is definitely a parallel, though, between the idea of not sweating the small stuff as much, but really paying attention and doing your best on the big stuff, whether that's trying to save money or whether that's trying to perfect things in your personal life or your professional life that matter.
Yeah. I don't know if you're writing another book, but I hope this is the topic, because that through line that you just talked about through all these different iterations is just it's so incredible. Like, it's really interesting to look at your story and to see those little peaks and those moments where it was about prioritizing the things that mattered most. That's what got most of your time. That's where you focused your energy. You did the other things well enough, but it was really about doubling down on the things that would have the biggest impact. And I love that. I think it's such a beautiful concept.
Thank you. And by the way, you just said something that made me remember that I need to always alert people that if you adopt the TRIfecta technique, all of your work will be good and your most important work will be exceptional. This is not crappy, better, best. The technique is good, better, best. And so I do want people to think, this is not an excuse to slough off. You have to have your baseline. So for me in journalism, it was very clear. My stories needed to be accurate and fair. And by the way, I never covered politics, so it was way more easy for me as a consumer reporter. Dollars and cents, baby. Easier than my colleagues who cover things that are a lot more subjective. So accurate and fair was the minimum standard. And then my better stories were accurate and fair. Plus they had some other flourishes, maybe some beautiful writing or some incredible arresting visuals or something that elevated them. And then those best, like I mentioned before, were the ones that had all of that and more, and the ability to make a difference. And that was the idea.
Yeah. I'm curious how you got into consumer affairs journalism in the first place, because as I understand it, that's not where you started.
Correct. I was a general assignment reporter. Started my career in Bakersfield, California, because I'm from California originally. Spent a year, 9 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days in Bakersfield. It's actually a great town, but it wasn't for me. And then I went to the Tampa Bay area, also as a general assignment reporter and weekend anchor sometimes. And I was covering, the classic local news stuff, hurricanes and murders and fires and some city council meetings. And then at one point, my boss asked me to join the consumer unit at the station. And this was WFLA TV, on your side, in the Tampa Bay area, which was really well known for its consumer unit. And at first I said, no, thanks, because I enjoyed the sort of running and gunning out in the field from one story to another. But then he came back to me a week or two later and said, no, really, I'm the boss and I'm asking you to do this. And I woke up to the realization, oh, right, you're in charge. So, yes, I took that on. And within a month, I thought, why did I ever hesitate? Because, frankly, every murder or fire only matters to the people who know those folks or if it happened near you, that sort of thing. Whereas these pocketbook issues matter to everybody. And helping people, save money, avoid scams, keep their families safe. It's so meaningful. And by the way, I had time to pee if I wanted to and get more than some gross, roadside food. So it was great all around. And as I mentioned before, too, just the idea that it was helpful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm curious as to whether once you started on the beat, was it something that you were like, oh yeah, I've loved this all along? Or was it a completely different way of thinking about not only your work, but also your personal life and your own personal finance?
Ooh, you ask good questions. So this was a crazy dichotomy. On the one hand, I considered myself a pretty fierce consumer, and I had done some consumer stories even in grad school that made some inroads. In fact, I was, as a student, interviewed on NPR about one of my stories, et cetera, and I thought I was, hot stuff. But on the other hand, the finance part of being a consumer reporter, I was clueless. I mean, I had credit card debt. I didn't know the difference between a stock and a bond. I learned that on the job as I went. And also then started dating this really cute young financial planner.
Oh, very helpful.
Yes, and learned a lot of it from him. I'm happy to say that is now my husband, 25 years later, actually more if you count the dating part. So, yes, I learned it on the job and learned it, from my husband in certain, sort of the slow drip method, I like to say. And it's amazingly gratifying how when you're doing something as your work, it can in turn create this virtuous cycle that helps you in your personal life as well. That was certainly the case for me.
Yeah. Now, I know you have a daughter, and I'm curious as to whether these topics and your past work enter into kind of how you are teaching her about money.
Yes, I try. I think she thinks I'm a total moron. I mean, right now she is applying to colleges, and I want to help her just read over her essays and not write them for her, but say, gosh, this part's a little confusing, and could you beef this one part up, et cetera, et cetera. And she keeps saying, oh, Mom, you don't know anything. And I said, well, I am an Emmy award-winning writer.
13 times over, by the way.
Specifically for writing. There are Emmys for different things. And I said this to her in the car the other day, and she said, you are? So, she was too young to remember my really cool days. But so, yes, in some ways she has no idea. But on the other hand, I have very consciously tried to teach her the value of money. And when we're shopping for clothes, as we love to do together, ask, gosh, are those $150 jeans really worth it? You do have 7 pairs already. And get her to think through those things. And I'm happy to say there are times now where she will say to me before I ask anything, oh, Mom, that's just not worth it. Let's find something. I could get 3 of those at, a different store or whatever. So in some ways it's working. In some ways, I think it'll take some time for her to grow into the, what I hope she will be financially and a fierce consumer and a strong woman and all of that. But she's 17, so work in progress.
Yeah. Well, hearing your voice in her head when you're not around is obviously, the goal that we all, I would say, I shouldn't ascribe this to everybody, but I certainly think about what are those messages that I hope that will be repeated in their heads when I'm not around to kind of guide and direct. And it sounds like you've done exactly that. So she'll be hearing you, no doubt, as she goes off and embarks on her life, which is really exciting. Elisabeth, how can folks find you to work with you and have you speak to their group and share some of this wisdom with them?
I would love for them to join me at my website, which is the hub for all things Elisabeth Leamy, and it is elisabethleamy.com. Or
Perfect.
if I'm really cool like that, Leamy's an unusual last name, and I actually own Leamy.com too,
Ah,
Leamy.com. So they can also just go to Leamy.com. Takes them to the same place. And I will also be ramping back up with LinkedIn as my primary focus for social media and all that. And I'm there as Elisabeth Leamy also, of course.
fantastic. Fantastic. Elizabeth, thank you so much. This has been such an incredibly insightful interview. I loved the conversation.
I enjoyed it. Thank you. And good questions.
Thank you. So, friend, as you think about all of the big projects on your list right now, and you think about Elizabeth's approach to TRIfecta, how would you rate your projects against Elizabeth's scale? Which of those projects fall into the talent, reward, and impact buckets? Or which ones fall into two of those or three of those buckets? I'd really love to hear. Be sure to send me your thoughts and your feedback on this or any of our She Said podcast episodes. You will find me at info@shesaid.media, or of course, you can message me on Instagram or LinkedIn. You'll find me at Laura Cox Kaplan. I'm here every single week with new episodes, so be sure to subscribe so you won't miss a minute. Until then, have a great rest of your week, and remember, She Said podcast is a weekly production of She Said Media.